Today I want to show you how you can photograph cathedrals, such as this beautiful cathedral here in Le Mans called Saint-Julien, or in English, Saint Julian. Over the course of the tutorial, what I want to do is I want to show you the gear that I'm using, the techniques, all these types of things, so you can have a good idea if you go into your own local cathedral or church or even abbey, what you can do with it, how you can photograph it, and the type of gear that you are going to need in order to capture it at its best. When it comes to the gear that you're going to need in order to photograph a cathedral such as the one here in Le Mans, ideally you want your camera on a tripod. Mine is actually on its tripod at the moment. Now in some cathedrals and churches, certainly you get in Italy and other more bigger famous cathedrals such as for example Notre Dame de Paris, when it was open, they said no tripods at all. You have to actually have special permission. In the past I have actually had that permission to photograph Notre Dame with a tripod. Now when it comes to your camera lenses, any digital SLR is good enough to photograph, or a compact mirrorless camera for example to photograph a cathedral. Lens-wise though, you can be looking at anything from a 24-70, 16-35, right up to 100 to 400 to be concentrating on the details that you've got, certainly like on the capitals along here between the nave and the aisles. We'll come back to that later. Ideally, if you can, and if you watch my vlogs regularly, you'll see that I use a 24mm tilt shift. That again is ideally, that is perfect to be doing cathedrals because you can keep everything bolt upright. At times it's not always necessary, but it really depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. For me, I'm trying to achieve high quality images to sell, to be able to market, to be able to sell in books and magazines, etc. So I need everything to be as good as it can. But let's move on to each different part of the cathedral and how I would approach it, and I'm going to show you how I approach it so you can get ideas for yourselves when we're in this period of lockdown, or even when we're not in lockdown. You can still come to these places. They are beautiful works of architecture. The obvious place to start when you're photographing a cathedral or a church and even an abbey is basically the nave, this big part here in the middle. On each side you have aisles, and then at times you also have chapels. Between the nave back there and then the choir, you've got what's called the transept. But don't worry, we're going to be going through each of these. I'll remind you of what they each are as I'm going through the tutorial, but here I'm going to start with the nave. First of all, what I'm going to do is take a shot looking straight down, and then I'm going to go to each side, and then I'm also going to use a long lens to get the stained glass window in the choir back there. So you can see already that it's not just a case of using one lens, for example the 24mm tilt shift, but also a long lens to concentrate on more detailed shots here in the cathedral. This is the first obvious shots that you can do in a cathedral or abbey or church, where you're looking right down the nave towards the choir there in the background. What I've done to actually line up my photograph is you have all these floor tiles, which seem actually to be extremely good as far as the architecture is concerned, and everything is actually level going down. It makes it a lot easier for me to try and line everything up to make sure that all the angles that I want are there and that they are going to be consistent. Now some of the churches and abbeys that you might go in, you'll find that things aren't always as true and level as you want them to be, just because foundations are old, buildings start moving, etc. And so just be aware of that. At the moment on the front of my camera is a Canon 24mm tilt shift Mark II. Now I know that some people will say, well hey, what do? I don't have one. I don't have a tilt shift. Now a lot of people basically they'll put on a wide angle lens, they will then tilt their camera like this, and they will be very happy, and quite happy actually, with a converging vertical scene like this. This is what you call converging verticals, whereby the building collapses in on itself. Now some people might actually like that look. It depends on what it is that you're after. So let's take a shot there. Now as I said, for some people they might like this, they might like the sort of looming effect of the nave collapsing in on itself, giving you that kind of feeling of perspective. However, The benefit, of course, of a tilt shift lens is if I put the camera level again, let's make sure it's level with the back of the camera. You can see my level coming in here, just around. Actually, I just keep it not completely level. Sometimes it hurts actually the image doing that. So let's then shift the lens up. Now what I'm doing here, compositionally, is that you can see these struts coming in here, this arch, this Gothic arch, and then in the corners you've got the arches coming down. So it's creating really nice perspective going down there towards the nave. So you can see everything is bolt upright. I've got the chairs that are going down there, leading you into the image, these leading lines. Putting on this crosshair as well on the back of the camera really helps you to focus in on the center point there, just to make sure your perspectives are all going in. So that's the first shot that I'm doing down the nave. I'm actually going to do 2 exposures just so that I can get all of the nave, the main nave here lit up, and then also an exposure for the stained glass window in the choir there. One of the next angles that you can do of the nave is to basically take your camera, put it to the side of the nave, just outside of the aisle, and then looking at an angle into the nave. Now this is really where you do need a tilt shift lens to be able to capture the beautiful perspective of the nave going down towards the choir. I'll show you why with the converging verticals, how it just doesn't really work, that it can kind of look really ugly, why at times that you're going to look at it and go, do you know what, actually I really do need a tilt shift, I'm going to go in a higher one. And that is actually a really good idea if you've never used a tilt shift and you're really interested in photographing cathedrals. Go and hire a tilt shift lens if you've never used one, see how it transforms your photography. But let me show you what it is that I'm going to do with this angle looking down the nave and how much difference it makes just instead of going straight into the nave. So this is why you look down this angle into a nave. You can see already the perspective that's being created. You've got a line going here without even moving the lens up of those chairs. However, let's shift the lens up. Let's watch what happens. So what I like to do here is you have a third, and then a third. What I want to do on this third here is have the choir, the edge of the choir, and then this line going down here on the top of the nave that's basically creating this diagonal line. And then what happens is you're led in to the image there. You're led through the cathedral. You're walking down there towards the choir at the back. So you can see how much more better it is, how much more dimension is given to your image just by coming to the side and instead of looking straight into the nave, we're down looking at an angle down the nave. So let's take that, let's take my shots. So basically what I'm doing here is I've got a shot that's set for the exposure of the nave, the main exposure, and then I've also gone 3 stops down, which is allowing me to capture enough detail to get the stained glass windows there. So you'll see on this final shot here, there's a little bit of blinkies up there, but normally that's quite recoverable in Lightroom. You can see there on the histogram itself that there is enough detail. So that's the shot there with the tilt shift. Now I know some of you again will be saying, but I don't have a tilt shift. So let's show you what it's like. Hopefully this won't mess up the GoPro too much because of the way it's balanced. But you'll see there, as soon as I start tilting up the lens, what actually happens, how nasty it actually looks. Those really horrible converging verticals where it looks as though the building is collapsing in on itself. We don't want that. This is again why I use my tilt shift, why I invested in getting a tilt shift lens. Let's show you something else in this beautiful cathedral that you can photograph. So the next thing that I've done is I've taken my 100 to 400 lens, my Canon 100 to 400, and I've pointed it right up at the back of the choir, the stained glass that's there. what you're also going to see is what I was mentioning earlier, that the building isn't necessarily true when it comes to the architecture. It looks as though I tried to move around a bit and I've tried to get everything consistent, but it's not consistent. I'll show you what it is that I mean when I'm showing you the shot that I've got set up here, looking above the choir with the long lens. This is the long lens shot that I'm looking at down the nave towards the choir there. So you can see those beautiful stained glass windows here. Now obviously they're blowing out at the moment because what I'm trying to do is actually capture what it is that my eye sees. I want to be able to capture a photograph of this choir, this beautiful, magnificent choir, how my eyes see it. So I'm going to have to take 2 or 3 exposures in order to get enough detail in each of the exposures to then blend the exposures together. Now I mentioned that the architecture isn't necessarily true in some of these old buildings, and you can certainly see this when I tried to do this exposure here. So you've got on the corner here, part of this Gothic arch coming down, and this one here, these beautiful arches coming down here, these beautiful Gothic arches. When you actually start looking closely at the building, you'll see how out it is. It's not actually true, it's not there, it's not consistent. So what do? There's nothing you can do because obviously it's built hundreds of years ago, but you just try to do your best, you concentrate on what it is that you want to do. I could actually go maybe further in to actually get rid of those arches, but that's a conscious decision that you want to make. That's your own composition, your own style. You do what it is that pleases you. The next technique that I want to show you is looking down the aisle. This is the aisle on the side of the nave. I'm going to come back to smaller details a bit later on, such as on the columns here up to the capitals. But in any case, what I want to do here is show you that with a 24 to 70mm lens, you can get some good shots looking down the aisle and add a longer focal length than 50mm, starting to compress things together to give you a bit more sense of perspective and a sense of height and how grandiose the building is. I'll show you what it is that I'm doing on the back of my camera. So this is the shot that I've got looking down the aisle there. You can see, hopefully on the back of my camera, that everything is going down at an angle there. I'm in portrait. Why am I in portrait orientation? For the very simple reason, this is very narrow. And so to go into landscape mode will actually require using a tilt shift lens to actually get the view between here and into the nave, but I'll show you that in a minute. But you can see here this beautiful architecture that's going down there. There's the arches that's going down. It's not perfect, as I said. It ideally needs, for example, maybe like a 90mm tilt shift to keep everything perfect, keep everything bolt upright. I don't have a 90mm, but that's okay. You can get something looking down here. So there's a shot down the aisle of a little bit of the nave, but let's really show you how you can use a tilt shift lens at a wide angle to get lots of other things in to create something a lot more dynamic than just this shot here. This is the next shot that I want to show you, looking down the aisle but actually into the nave itself. That beautiful nave there. Now what have I done? Well, I've put on a 17mm tilt shift, and you can do this with a 24 as well. It depends on how big the cathedral is, how tall these arches are here as to what it is you can get in. But I've used a 17 to really show you the expansiveness of this place. At times it's a bit of a tricky lens to work with, but you'll see what it is that I'm doing on the back of the camera. So I've got the aisle here that's going down and then looking into the nave, trying to move the cameras around as well to actually get angles, different things going into corners. But I'll explain on the back of the camera what it is that I'm doing, why a 17mm tilt shift is extremely useful doing this type of shot. And yes, you can use a 24. Maybe I'll put on my 24 and show you the difference between doing 17 and 24, just so you can get a bit of an idea between the two lenses. So this is the angle that I've got looking down the aisle here. You can see there's the aisle, there's the nave, and on the front is a 17mm tilt shift that's helping bring everything into perspective. It is a bit extreme at times, but you have to kind of work with it and work things out. There is a little bit of distortion that's going in there. What have I done with the shot? What were the angles that I was talking about? We've got this angle here with these where these chairs are. Also, where the line is coming down on the crosshair there, you can see there's this part of the nave there that's going down, so it's following down, leading you in down here, down on the end of the aisle towards the ambulatory. So there you go, that's the shot that I've got. It is going to take a little bit of exposure blending. There is a light that's in here that's going to probably overexpose this part here. That's okay. I mean, the main interest for me, most of the light is cut out anyway, so it's mostly the architecture that I'm looking at. So I'm going to get my shot, and then I'm going to move on somewhere else, probably to the transept, and then maybe working my way around the ambulatory. The next shot that I want to show you in photographing cathedrals is looking up at the transept. Where's the transept? Well, basically, there's the nave behind me. Behind the camera is the choir, and then you have the ambulatory going around the side, and then where it crosses, up there, this is the transept. There is one problem in that you can't actually get right underneath the transept, just because it's actually cordoned off at the moment. Some cathedrals, some churches, some abbeys, you can, but some you can't. This is one that you can't. So there's a couple of things you can do. So you can use the good old tilt shift again to actually go up and then shift across, or you can then actually look up at an angle and create some striking converging verticals going in, looking up towards the transept there. But I'll show you what it is that I'm doing. I might be able to show on the back of my camera. It really depends, because it's a very, very awkward shot. This is the shot that I was talking about, looking from the end of the nave, looking right up at the transept there. What I've actually done, just to get it a bit more severe and really coming in and really kind of in your face, is actually put on my 16 to 35. It's on 16 millimeters, zoomed right out, and you're looking right up there at the transept. You can see everything coming in, so it's giving you that perspective, looking upwards, looking inwards, giving you that just beautiful, beautiful architecture there from the Middle Ages. So that's one thing that you can do. And as I said, normally in some cathedrals, I say normally, it depends on the cathedral, sometimes you can actually get right underneath the middle of the transept and look up. In this case, I can't. So that's why I've had to come back a bit, because it's sectioned off, and I've got my camera up at an angle like the GoPro is, looking up there towards the transept. I'm going to have to do an exposure blend as well, because there is obviously the light coming in there. But it doesn't matter. You can hopefully see a good idea of what it is you can do just by looking straight up. Now also, it's worth mentioning that in some naves you get some really beautiful naves, and what I'm going to do at the end of this tutorial, I'm going to show you a lot of the architectural shots that I've done in different cathedrals and abbeys across the world, and you can see what it is that I've done and how I've managed to create what it is that I do. But as I'm sure you'll agree, Le Mans is just beautiful, absolutely worth coming here to photograph it. Look at that beautiful Gothic architecture. Those of you that were listening closely would have noticed that I went from a 24mm tilt shift on the transepts to a 16-35. What happened to the images from the 24? Well, basically what I've done is a almost pseudo-panoramic image where I've shifted the image from here over to there, just to try and get a little bit more into the transept, because I can't step over that threshold there. What do? That's basically the beauty of a tilt shift lens. You can get a bit more sort of in there, you can get a bit different images when you're doing these architectural shots. What I'm going to do now is then move around, and I'm going over to the ambulatory, and I'm going to show you the ambulatory, what you can do with it. It is actually quite difficult, and here you're definitely going to need a tilt shift. Otherwise, what you're going to be dealing with is doing a wide angle shot, very severe converging verticals, and then correcting them with a transform tool either in Lightroom or in Photoshop. But let me show you what it is that I mean, so you know the difficulties you have photographing cathedrals at times. And then from there, we're going to move to the choir, and then from there, we're going to look at a little bit more of the details of the cathedral itself. Welcome to the ambulatory of Le Mans Cathedral. You can see what it was that I was talking about when I said everything starts closing in and why you're likely to need a tilt-shift lens to really get the best out of a cathedral or a church or an abbey. You can see these beautiful Gothic arches here, but everything's very tight in, and so using a tilt shift you're able to sort of get in and shift up and to be able to put everything properly into perspective. Or as tilt shift lenses are also called, they're also called, as far as Nikon uses, perspective control. I'll show you what it is that I'm doing on the back of my camera so you can see the issues that you're likely to have using a regular lens rather than a tilt shift lens to try and correct things in here, to try to get everything looking really, really nice, because it is really nice in here, but you really do need to do it properly if you can. Let me show you what I'm doing so you can see the results that I'm getting with a tilt shift lens. This is what I'm looking at going into the ambulatory. So you can see this column coming down here, it sits nicely on the third. The bottom of this column over here, again, that sits nicely on the third, but it still kind of looks unbalanced to me. And so ideally what you want to be able to do is to make sure that you can get all of these Gothic arches in that are up here. So if I actually tilt the lens up, you'll see the issues that start coming in. As I've said before, I know some people may like those converging verticals, but do you imagine what the angle of the lens you're going to have to use to get everything in that you want to then actually use the transform tool to get everything looking upright. Let's put the lens back. So I'm just going to level up my camera there. And let's shift up, and then you'll see what happens, the beauty of having this lens. Now, something you do need to actually watch with tilt shift lenses is don't shift too far. Why? Because you get distortion at the top and bottom of the images, so it actually can be really detrimental at times. So just think very carefully where you are before you start going, oh, okay, I'm going to shift 12 degrees right up that way. It's not always a good thing. So at the moment it's probably on about 8 or so degrees, I would say. I can't see the dial on my camera. But what I wanted to do is get these arches in here. Now this is almost like an 80% image here and 20% down here, probably maybe 90-10. But it looks, for me, a lot more balanced. And it's almost like, for example, if you were in a forest, in woodland, I'm trying to get all these struts coming down here, these columns, sorry, just coming down, trying to organize them, trying to get some kind of consistency and order in the image. But that's what it is that I'm doing there, so I'll flick up the image in a minute. You can also, if you've got an even wider lens, for example the 17mm tilt shift, you can actually get a lot more of this place in, doing it in landscape mode rather than portrait mode. But I do like doing these places in portrait mode, showing the real grandiose architecture that those ancestors of ours left us. I've put on my Canon 16-35mm lens just to show you what it's like when you're trying to photograph inside the ambulatory and the converging verticals you are going to get and how much you're going to have to correct it and what you're going to lose in your final image. Some people might not mind losing those things, but I do. But I'll show you what it is I'm doing, and then I'll show you a before and then after where things have been corrected. See how much is lost in that final image. This is the view looking southwards, southeastwards, I would say, through the ambulatory. You can see things are actually bolt upright. It's on 16mm, the lens. What's the issue? Well, basically, it's okay. It depends on what it is you want. But ideally, you actually need to be getting more of these arches in. It looks too much negative space here on the floor. So ideally, what you want to be doing is pulling the camera up, something like this. And then you can see this arch here coming in. But you can see the problem. As soon as you do that, you get converging verticals. So let's shift it up just a little bit more on the back of the camera. If I take a photograph like that, now I've actually got the auto exposure bracketing on just to merge two images together. I've taken a shot before this when the camera was completely leveled off, and you'll see the difference. You're going to see how much it is that you're going to lose on the edges. Some people might find that okay. I don't. I like to get my images in camera, not just the exposure, but also the composition, which for me is extremely important to do. After this, I'm going to go and take you in the choir. I'm now stood in this beautiful choir here in Le Mans Cathedral. What I'm going to do is get my camera and basically look straight up. It's quite a high choir. Not all cathedrals have very high choirs, but when they do, one of the shots you can do is to basically get your camera, turn it up like this, and then look straight up. And you do need a very wide angle to actually get everything in. I've been here a long time ago and I did a similar shot, but different eyes, different techniques. Let's see what it is that I can do. One of the other things I'd like to give you on is a tip, and it doesn't always work. It depends on how true the architecture is in the cathedral. Use the floor tiles to try and get the angles so that you can get everything consistent up there when you're looking straight up. It is a bit of a neck twister when you're looking straight up, so do be careful of that, but I'll show you what it is I'm going to do. You basically want your camera turning around this way and then looking up like this. So you don't want your camera, I guess you would say, in landscape mode here. You want it in portrait mode, looking straight up to those beautiful stained glass windows in the cathedral. This is the shot that I'm looking at here in Le Mans Cathedral, looking straight up at the choir. The back of the camera is basically parallel with the floor, looking straight up. The tripod, there's these diagonal tiles going down the choir. What I've done is I've placed my camera 2 legs in each of the corners and then another leg in another corner to then get it so everything is balanced, everything is equal, everything is ordered, because that's what you want when you look up. You don't want any distortion, you don't want any lines that just don't look right. I've tried to make sure everything is as balanced and as ordered as possible, looking straight up at the choir. What can you do from here? There's a couple of things I'll explain. I'm not necessarily going to do a photographic demonstration. It doesn't really need it, but I'll explain and then I'll wrap up. So apart from the choir, apart from the ambulatory, the nave, the aisle, what else can you do? There's lots of other things that you can do in cathedrals. If, for example, you go back into the nave, you can look at the top of the columns towards the capitals. Look at the capitals, they're really detailed in some cathedrals. Some of them tell a story. If, for example, you go to the Abbey in Vézelay, all of the tops of the capitals tell a story of the history of the area and the history of the Bible, all sorts of things. So there's many, many things that you can be looking at detail-wise for capitals. And also, it's not just the capitals. Look up in ceilings. For example, if you go to Gloucester Cathedral in the United Kingdom, there are beautiful angels right up in the top of the choir that I was asked to photograph one day. Gloucester, again, has a beautiful cloister. Here I haven't seen if there's a cloister. I don't think there is. There's many, many things. The exterior of the cathedral. Today isn't the best day to be doing the exterior of the cathedral. It's more about the interior of the cathedral. But some of the cathedral exteriors that you get are just simply bewildering. They're just the Gothic architecture or other Romanesque architecture is stunning to photograph. If you've been following my vlogs of late, you'll have seen the Romanesque architecture that's here in France. But in any case, I hope now you actually have a better idea of some of the things that you can do in cathedrals. Certainly the interior. Keep your eyes out as well for all of the other smaller and finer details that you get in cathedrals, because they're well worth photographing. You'll see, as I said, certainly on the top of the capitals, up in the roofs, etc. Go to a cathedral, spend a good half a day in a cathedral, wandering around, taking the place in, taking the ambience of this place. As you can hear, the acoustics in here are amazing, and I'm just so grateful actually that when I was in here, the security guard said to me, "You're fine, you can use your tripod, not a problem," which has actually helped me. So thanks to that guy for letting me do that, and also not wearing a mask when people are not around, because that really helps as well. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on photographing cathedrals. and I hope too that you subscribe down there. Click on the notification bell up there. I'll see you on the next vlog, which I think is going to be a landscape one. We'll see. It looks like the weekend the weather's going to be great. Until the next one, see you again soon, and stay safe out there.